But one of the things that I find troubling is that the images that I see coming out of the country, and the emails that I've been getting from people saying that the coverage is not necessarily the type of coverage that should be coming, and the focus shouldn't really be where it's on. And I want to ask you, what did you think about that? That question is open to anybody on the panel.
Well, I think for me, there's been a representation of a government that has been completely ill-equipped to respond to a natural disaster. And to some extent, that's true. I mean, the Haitian government is ill-equipped to handle this natural disaster. But the narrative becomes a narrative of a nation that is poor and black and poor and black. And we look at all these, oh, here's poor, black, irresponsible, poor, black, can't handle the problem, poor, black. And there's never any conversation about positive moments coming out. There's no conversation about the ways in which Haitian people have helped themselves. And most importantly, there's no conversation about the set of processes and circumstances that got Haiti where it was. And that's the real issue for me.
Right. Well, another issue to really address there, in every other tragedy, when's the last time that you saw them actually show piles of bodies being put in dumpsters? Never saw that before, because they always say out of respect for the people. They got no respect there, firstly. Secondly, when they said, well, we can't fly anything in, you know, we're still trying to get things in and the runways are messed up. It's like, when we're doing a military mission, we can drop a runway in a second. And Air Force and helicopter lifts and so on and so forth. So then you have to really ask yourself, like, why is it that China was the first one with people on the ground helping? Why is it that every other country, America was the only one that sent the military first? The only one. So then you have to ask yourself, why is it that people are afraid to actually point the finger? Because when it was Bush, everybody said, rightfully so, that he was a criminal and that was unconscionable. And everybody is given with Katrina, but we've given Obama basically a clear pass, and everybody said, okay, well, you know.
Well, I think part of it is that in this whole conversation about Haiti, we haven't connected the way that folks here in the United States are connected to Haiti, right? Why it matters, the history of how the United States comes along, how black Americans come around, how Haiti is the cradle of the black liberation struggle, right? It's the first nation that comes out of chattel slavery, fights back the revolt, and takes control. And after that, becomes penalized for it over and over again, right? And so you get this narrative of the natural disaster, right? When a natural disaster strikes an impoverished nation, right, then you have something that's unnatural, right? It's really a man-made disaster. But you have this really tight line of, well, we control the bodies piling up because this is so terrible. The buildings weren't in place. The reality is, if you look at CNN, if you look at these programs, there are only a select number of cases where they put bodies on, but they're always black and brown bodies. When the tsunami hit Myanmar, they had footage after footage of brown bodies piled high. They won't do the same if they're people who are of European descent, right? And it's something about a lack of respect, as well as something about that land being foreign. Also, in the case of Katrina, folks are willing to say George Bush did wrong because they say, well, New Orleans is in the backyard. Folks, of course, like to look at Haiti as something distant. And that's why people are giving money. They're like, oh, let's help that poor country over there. When in reality, what we should be doing are giving in a form of reparations to rebuild infrastructure, to right the wrongs that the United States in particular and France and the wider range have done to Haiti to underdevelop it over time.
See, I didn't have a problem. Quite frankly, I don't have a problem with Barack Obama's response to Haiti. I might be in the minority on that. Clearly, if here I am, but I don't have a problem with his response at all. I think sending military was necessary in order to recover bodies, in order to maintain order. I think that dropping food in, as we've seen, has been reasonable. I actually do. I think that the critique of the Obama administration, if there is one, will come later when we see what types of policies will develop in response to the crisis. But at the moment, I can't imagine United States having any more military intervention, or any less military intervention than they did in order to maintain order and to engage in search and recovery. I think the amount of money donated was perfectly reasonable. I mean, it was 150 million, something like that.
Yeah, 100 million in grants,
yeah,
not loans.
No, right. I mean, that's significant. And I think when you put that in the context of private donations and other nations who are donating capital as well, I think it's actually a very strong response. And I think Obama was very assertive in talking about how the United States was committed to helping Haiti recover in the crisis. The problem to me, as you allude to, is what happens post-crisis. And I think that's the real question.
Well, even the people on the ground right now, I don't know how much, like, you know, once you get away from the CNNs and the MSNBCs and such, and you move to Democracy Now! And BAI and people who actually, and Pacifica, who actually have people on the ground, who are talking to the people that, like, you know, I mean, the to talk about the idea of no one would have a problem with it, France put out an official order because we're stopping planes from coming in. And it was only, and they were saying, well, okay, we can't get the planes in here, so on and so forth. And it's like, well, meanwhile, we're loading in military. China was the first ones on the ground. They didn't send military. They didn't have any problems. All these other countries.
What's your problem with military? I'm just trying to understand. What's the issue with military being?
Well, because if you're, well, less of what my problem is and what the people talk about that are actual, that were in Haiti helping before the crisis. Their problem was we don't need the military. You're militarizing a situation that doesn't need to be militarized. And if you send in that much military, it's like going into a club and having a whole bunch of cops go in that want to bash heads versus the idea of like, I'm coming to you as a human being. These people have complained over and over again about their treatment. When the first people that we sent in was drones. By day 2, we sent in C-130s. No, this is in Haiti.
Talking about Haiti.
In Haiti.
I'm trying to.
We sent in C-130s with a military for a military assessment team.
Let me ask
These
you a
are.
question.
I don't get why that's a problem.
But in other words, because it stops the people, it stops the humanitarian. You don't do humanitarian work with the military. That's not what the military does.
Different than the United States has done before within the Monroe Doctrine, the Western Hemisphere philosophy within that particular region. Anytime anything is happening in that region, the military always goes in first. So that's not anything different than what they've already been doing previously. But the question is, what's the motive behind it? That's what I'm interested in.
Right. And I think there's two sides, right? So I think you need military presence for stabilization, right?
Yeah.
But you also need humanitarian aid.